I've always believed that trust is binary. In my world of code and logic, a thing is either true or false. No gray, no almost. For the past 6 years, I thought my marriage was true, a solid one in a sea of zeros. My name is Alex, and until recently, I was a happily married software engineer living in a sunlit coastal neighborhood in Northern California. I had a beautiful home office overlooking the Pacific, a German electric car in the driveway, and a wife I adored named Julia. I considered myself a rational man, someone who could debug complex systems at work and apply the same methodical thinking to life. But nothing prepares you for the moment you realize your life has been running on a faulty script. It was an ordinary Tuesday when the first bit of evidence surfaced. That morning, I left for the office early to prep for a product launch. Julia was still asleep, her dark hair fanned over the pillow, unaware as I kissed her cheek and slipped out. By mid-afternoon, an infrastructure outage knocked out our cloud servers. With the launch delayed, my boss sent everyone home. I decided to surprise Julia by coming back a few hours early with takeout from her favorite Thai place. I remember humming along to the radio as I drove along the winding coastal road, the 2:30 p.m. sun glittering on the ocean to my right. When I pulled into our driveway, I noticed something odd. Julia's car was gone. That's strange, I thought. Tuesday was her work-from-home day. As a freelance graphic designer, she rarely had client meetings in person, and she hadn't mentioned any errands. I parked and stepped out into the salty breeze, assuming she might have stepped out for coffee or groceries. Entering the foyer, I instantly sensed an emptiness. The air was still, the only sound the soft whir of the ceiling fan. On the foyer table lay Julia's laptop, closed but not plugged in, and beside it, her personal phone. She never left without her phone. A prickle of worry ran up my spine. Where was she? I set the takeout on the kitchen island and pulled out my phone to text her. Before I could type, a notification banner popped up on our shared tablet, which was resting on the counter. It was linked to Julia's messaging app, a feature we'd enabled years ago on our devices for convenience, never dreaming it might one day betray her. The preview read, "Brandon, can't wait to see you again. Last night was incredible." Time seemed to freeze. I stared at the screen, my heart thudding in my ears. Brandon. The only Brandon I knew was a junior developer on my team, a bright kid I had been mentoring. We'd had him over to our house a couple of times for team barbecues and game nights. Surely this must be a different Brandon, or a misunderstanding. My skin prickled with dread as I tapped the notification with a trembling finger. The full thread opened, and with it, Pandora's box. Scrolling back revealed a series of messages over the past month, each one a dagger. Flirtations escalating to inside jokes, then overtly affectionate notes. There were recent ones from earlier that afternoon, coordinating a meetup at a cafe in town. "Are you sure Alex won't be home? I don't want to slip up," Brandon wrote. "He's swamped with the launch." "We're good," Julia replied. Beneath that was a photo he'd sent, a selfie of his annoyingly handsome face, with Julia clearly visible behind him in a booth at what looked like Seabreeze Cafe, a spot by the waterfront. She was smiling at him, not at the camera, an intimate, unguarded smile I thought was reserved only for me. My hands clenched into fists, phone still in one of them. The logical part of my brain struggled to parse the data. My wife was meeting another man, my mentee of all people, behind my back. The emotional part of my brain? It felt as though an earthquake had cracked the carefully structured code of my life, leaving nothing but a gaping void. I didn't scream or cry. In that moment, I became very still. It's a survival mechanism, I suppose. my mind flipping a switch from hurt to analysis, from husband to investigator. A fragment of an old conversation came back to me. One with Julia, years ago before we married, when I insisted on a prenuptial agreement. "It's just a worst-case safeguard," I'd explained. "I trust you completely, but I've seen colleagues lose everything to infidelity or sudden change of heart. I need to know we're both protected from any surprises." At the time, she'd laughed and called me paranoid, but she signed without much protest. Now that foresight was about to become my weapon. I took a slow breath, heart pounding, and made a decision then and there. I would not confront Julia immediately. Instead, I would do what I do best: gather data, form a plan, and execute with precision. This wasn't just a fight for my dignity. It was a high-stakes operation to salvage what remained of my life and to exact a price for the betrayal. I texted Julia casually, "Hey, hope your day's going well. Bringing home dinner soon. Love you." A benign message to avoid raising suspicion. Then I quietly left the house, got back in my car, and headed toward the Seabreeze Cafe. As I drove the coastal road into town, a dark irony settled in my mind. I'd spent my career designing algorithms to catch fraud and anomalies in complex systems. Yet the biggest anomaly of all, my wife's affair, had hidden in plain sight, in the blind spot of my love and trust. Now that I saw it, I was going to trace it to its source like a bug in the code, document every detail, and eradicate it completely. I parked a block away from the cafe to avoid being seen. The late afternoon sun was glaring as I walked up the sidewalk, heart hammering in my chest. I felt absurdly like a spy in my own town, ducking behind a large potted palm by the cafe's side patio. Peering around the fronds, I spotted them. Julia and Brandon seated at a corner table outside, overlooking the rocky shoreline. They were holding hands across the table. Even from a distance, I could see Julia's face glowing in a way she hadn't with me in, how long? Months. Had I been too buried in work to notice the signs? She was leaning forward, hanging on his every word. Brandon looked smug, confident in a cocky, youthful way. He was 27 to my 38, fresh out of grad school and apparently fresh into my wife. My stomach churned with a mix of nausea and fury, but I forced myself to remain calm and unseen. I slid my phone from my pocket and, using the camera app, snapped a few photos zoomed in on them. In one, Julia's head was tilted back in laughter, his hand resting on her knee under the tablecloth. In another, he was kissing her cheek while she looked delighted and a little nervous. Evidence. Cold, undeniable evidence. I crept away before they could notice me, retreating to my car. My hands shook as I reviewed the photos, each one a digital punch to the gut. But I knew I'd need far more than a few pictures for what I intended. As I sat in the driver's seat, mind racing, I recognized that this affair was more than a fling. It was an ongoing operation, and I would treat it as such. I wasn't going to simply confront them and shout, no. That was too easy on them. Julia and her lover had made choices, calculated and deceitful, over weeks or months. I would respond in kind, with calculation and deceit of my own. Staring out at the golden waves beyond the road, I swallowed the bitter taste in my mouth and dialed a number I never thought I'd need so soon. Tony Nguyen, ISQAO, my divorce attorney. Well, technically, he was the attorney who had drafted our prenup and whom I'd consulted privately just once before our wedding. At the time, hiring him felt like a formality, a fire extinguisher behind glass that I'd never break unless of emergency. That glass was now shattered. Tony picked up on the third ring. "Alex, everything all right?" he asked. We weren't exactly friends, but he remembered me clearly. I had been nervous when I first met him years ago, asking about infidelity clauses and asset protection. I recall him joking that I was planning for an apocalypse on a sunny day. I kept my voice low and level. Not exactly. I need your counsel, urgently. It's about my wife. She's cheating on me, Tony. Saying it aloud solidified the reality, each word like a stone in my throat. Tony paused, then his tone sharpened. I'm sorry to hear that. We should meet as soon as possible. Are you safe to talk now? I glanced around my empty car. Yes, I've just discovered it. I have some evidence, but I intend to gather more. I want to make sure the prenup and any other tools work in my favor when I confront her. And I'm prepared to be extremely aggressive. I could almost hear Tony adjusting his posture through the phone. Understood. You recall the terms of your prenuptial agreement? It's ironclad on division of assets. Separate property remains separate, and jointly acquired assets are to be split equitably unless adultery is proven. The adultery clause states that if one spouse can prove the other's infidelity, the guilty party waives claim to spousal support and agrees to a 90-10 split of joint assets in the innocent party's favor. I remember, I said quietly, my eyes fixed on a distant ship near the horizon. I had insisted on that clause. At the time, Julia rolled her eyes but signed, joking that if I ever cheated, she'd take me to the cleaners, and if she did, she'd deserve whatever she got. She'd agreed, perhaps because she never expected to be on the receiving end of it. Well, Tony continued, if you can substantiate her affair, you're positioned to enforce that. But you'll need solid proof, dates, communications, ideally eyewitness or photographic evidence of intimate encounters. Does she know you suspect anything? No, I said. Not a clue. I plan to keep it that way for now. Today was the first hard evidence. I have some photos of them together from just now, and I have access to some of her messages. I intend to get much more. Good. Be careful. Don't do anything rash, Alex. I know you're hurt, Tony began. I cut in, voice like ice. Hurt is not the problem. She made this a calculation. I will respond with a better one. I'm not calling you from some motel bar while drowning sorrows. I'm calling to strategize. I almost didn't recognize the cold, focused tone coming out of my own mouth. Tony exhaled. All right. Keep records of everything. And if you need a private investigator's help, I can refer someone discreet. But given your skill set, you might manage on your own. Still, illegal surveillance. I'm aware of the lines, I assured him. I won't do anything that jeopardizes the legal case, only what's necessary. We arranged to meet in person the next day at his office downtown. As I hung up, a grim resolve settled over me. My life had just forked into a before and after, and I was firmly stepping into the after, where every move was deliberate. I took one last look at the cafe from afar. Sure enough, I saw Julia and Brandon emerging, hand in hand, thinking themselves unobserved. I slunk lower in my seat, snapping a quick photo of them walking to his car. Julia tucking a strand of hair behind her ear the way she does when she's happy. Brandon placing a possessive hand on the small of her back. They drove off in his blue Audi, likely heading to one of the scenic lookout points, or maybe even a hotel if they were bold. The thought made my jaw clench so hard it hurt. I did not follow. Instead, I returned home to lay the groundwork for what came next. The house was still empty when I arrived. I set our dinner in the fridge, then methodically went about preparing the battlefield. A part of me noted the dark irony. I was playing the gracious husband, bringing her favorite pad thai, while planning her ruin. Up in my home office, I powered on my computer and began silently hacking my own marriage. First, I accessed our home security camera system. We had a few indoor cameras for our cat's antics and for general security, one in the living room, another in the upstairs hallway. I adjusted their angles remotely to cover wider views, including the front entry and the door to our master bedroom. I also set them to continuous record instead of motion-activated, saving the feeds to a local server. If Julia dared bring Brandon into my home at any point, I wanted it on tape. She likely didn't realize I could access the settings from my laptop. I was the one who had installed the system. Next, I dug into our cell phone account online. As I suspected, there were hours of call logs between Julia's number and an unrecognized number. The burner phone Brandon must be using to contact her, or maybe just his secondary line. The logs showed late-night calls when I was away on business last month, and even a 30-minute call just 2 days ago when I'd been at the gym. The betrayal was layered deep, and each discovery simultaneously hurt and steeled my resolve. With a few keystrokes, I activated a feature I'd built for a side project months ago. A script that would forward copies of all text messages from Julia's phone number to an encrypted folder on my cloud drive. It was originally a debugging tool for an SMS integration. I never imagined I'd use it to spy on my own wife. But here we were. I also quietly added her personal email to the script, capturing future emails and attachments. My hands moved with steady purpose, but I could feel my body trembling when I paused. To calm myself, I opened a desk drawer and pulled out a photograph. Our wedding day, 5 years ago. There we were on a cliffside overlooking the ocean, wind in our hair, eyes bright with tears of joy. I stared at Julia's radiant face in the picture, searching for some clue, some early bug in the system I should have caught. But there was nothing obvious, just a beautiful, intelligent woman in love with her husband, or so I had believed. I wasn't sure if I was looking at a stranger now, or if she had become one over time. Why? A voice inside me pleaded. Why would she risk everything? But as quickly as the question came, I killed it. The reasons didn't matter. She'd broken the binary. She'd flipped our marriage to false. The only thing left was the consequences. Before I could spiral into sentiment, I carefully placed the photo face down and locked it away. I had to treat this situation like a zero-sum game, and sentimentality had no place in it. By the time I finished setting up my surveillance and gathering initial records, it was nearly 5 p.m. I heard Julia's car pulling into the driveway. My heart rate spiked, but I forced myself to appear normal. I shut my laptop, walked downstairs, and greeted her at the door with a gentle smile as if nothing was amiss. "There you are," I said, leaning in to kiss her cheek. She had the faint scent of vanilla and something floral that wasn't her usual perfume. A pang of anger hit me. Was it some new fragrance for him? But I masked it. "I got us dinner. Your favorite pad thai is in the fridge." Julia looked momentarily surprised by my presence. Did I catch a flicker of guilt in her eyes? Or was it just my imagination? She quickly beamed. "Oh, that's so sweet, Alex. I wish I'd known you were coming home early. I went out for a bit." She lifted a small shopping bag as if to justify her absence. "I got us a new tea blend from that shop by the pier. Thought it might help your stress with the launch and all." Her lie was smooth, embedded in truth. She did have tea in that bag. I could smell the bergamot. Likely bought it after her tryst to have an alibi. I felt a muscle in my jaw twitch. She was looking right into my eyes, giving me that warm smile that used to make me feel loved. Now it just made me feel ill. I forced a chuckle and took the bag from her, brushing my fingers lightly over hers. That's thoughtful, and it's all right. I should have called first. Launch got postponed. Gave me a chance to treat you to dinner for once. I held up the bag of takeout containers. Authentic pad thai and spring rolls. I even got that mango sticky rice dessert you like. Her face lit up, and for a moment I saw genuine delight. You're spoiling me, she teased. Let me get plates. We can eat out on the deck? Perfect, I replied, internally marveling at how calmly I was performing. If there were an Oscar for Best Portrayal of a Loving, Oblivious Husband, I'd have been a shoo-in. We settled at the patio table overlooking the water, the sky streaked with pink and orange as the sun lowered. It would have been a romantic evening under any other circumstances. Julia chatted about mundane things, the quirky new client who wanted a logo in Comic Sans, the neighbor's dog that kept digging in our flower bed. I nodded and responded in the right places, even managing a few laughs. Meanwhile, in the back of my mind, a second Alex was observing everything. The slight quiver in her hand as she lifted her wineglass, the overcompensation in her stories, the way she didn't mention going out at all. She was testing me, in her own way, seeing if I had any clue. I gave her none. Feigned indifference, check. At one point, as we shared the mango sticky rice, I casually said, "Oh, I bumped into Tony Nahoyen downtown on my way home." This was a lie. I hadn't seen him in person yet, but I wanted to see her reaction to the name of our lawyer. Julia's hand froze for just a fraction of a second, her spoon hovering in midair. "Tony? Our lawyer Tony? What were you doing over there?" I shrugged easily. "Just grabbing some aspirin at the pharmacy near his building. We only chatted for a second. He asked how we were doing. I said great. I made eye contact and smiled. I told him we might invite him and his wife over for dinner sometime, as thanks for the prenup work he did. It's been 5 years, can you believe it?" She relaxed visibly, letting out a light laugh. 5 years, wow. Time flies. Then she shook her head. "I doubt most people celebrate their prenup lawyer, honey. But sure, we could do dinner." I chuckled. "True. I guess that's a bit much." I reached across and squeezed her hand gently. "I just feel grateful, that everything has worked out so well with us. No hidden surprises. That was a dagger coated in sugar, and I watched it sink in as her smile strained at the edges. She squeezed back and quickly changed the subject. "So tell me more about the launch delay. Anything I can help with to de-stress you?" Her tactic was almost textbook. Redirect and double down on caring wife mode. I played along and talked about the project, even though my mind was elsewhere. Did I push too hard with that prenup reference? Possibly. But her response told me she hadn't suspected my suspicion. Not yet. As the evening wrapped up, Julia left to take a shower before bed. I busied myself cleaning up dinner, then locked myself in my office under the guise of catching up on some work. In reality, I pored over the new messages my script had caught during dinner. Sure enough, there was one from Brandon about an hour ago. "Missing you already. Tomorrow same time?" It took all my self-control not to storm into the bathroom and confront her soaking form with the phone as evidence. But that wasn't part of the plan. Not yet. Instead, I typed out a reply on my laptop, emulating Julia's casual tone and timing. "Can't tomorrow. I'll let you know. Have to be careful." 3. I cued it to send from her device via the script. Essentially, I ghost wrote a message that would appear on her phone as if she sent it. This way, Brandon wouldn't grow suspicious if she didn't reply promptly. I needed to control the pace of their communications now, subtly, to ensure they didn't do anything unpredictable. After a while, I heard Julia climb into bed. I joined her, heart pounding with anger and confusion as I slipped under the covers. She curled against me like nothing was wrong, laying her head on my chest. I wrapped an arm around her, staring up at the dark ceiling. If she could hear my heart racing, she gave no sign. In a world of lies, she fell asleep quickly, breathing softly while I lay awake with my eyes open, mind running through every step I would take to dismantle her world. In the darkness, I thought about the three of us, Alex, Julia, and Brandon, and how each would emerge when this was over. Julia, I promised myself, would come out financially devastated, her reputation in tatters. Brandon's bright tech career would be effectively terminated. There was no universe in which I'd allow him to thrive after what he'd done under my own roof, or at least soon-to-be former roof. And I would survive. I would walk away with my head high, assets intact, and maybe a touch of dark satisfaction. If that sounds vindictive, so be it. Call it my coding of morality. A cheat was a fatal error in the program of marriage. The only way to fix it is to remove the corrupted parts entirely and reboot fresh. And I intended that no patch or apology would resurrect this union. With that cold comfort, I finally felt fatigue wash over me. I murmured good night into Julia's hair, and she mumbled something sweet and drowsy back. 3 little words I'd once have given anything to hear. Now they felt hollow. As I drifted off, I promised myself that when this was done, I'd never share a bed with betrayal again. The countdown had begun. The buffer before the storm was ticking away. Tonight might be the last normal night of our marriage, though it was a lie. Tomorrow, the real work of revenge would begin. The next morning, I woke at dawn to the sound of waves and the weight of Julia's arm draped over me. I carefully slid out of bed, heart jackhammering from a nightmare I couldn't fully remember. Something about drowning in the ocean while Julia watched from the shore. How fitting. In the gentle blue light, I stood there for a moment just watching her sleep. She looked peaceful, innocent even. How many times had I woken up beside her like this, feeling like the luckiest man alive? The thought nearly softened me, but then she stirred, and as she rolled over I saw it. A faint red mark on her neck, partly obscured by her hair. A love bite, not from me. The sight was like a bucket of ice water to my face. Any hint of softness evaporated. I quietly left the bedroom, shutting the door behind me, and headed to my office. I had a full day ahead, and if my wife was going to play the role of loving spouse, I'd play the hard-working, oblivious husband to the hilt. By 7:30 a.m., I had already checked the overnight captures from the surveillance. Nothing notable, just us sleeping. I also reviewed the contents of Julia's phone that my scripts had logged. A few innocuous emails, some spam, and late at night a draft in her notes app that caught my eye. A list of tasks including cancel gym membership and talk to Brandon re-weekend. It seemed she was considering adjusting routines, perhaps to create more time for the affair. The audacity made my blood boil. She was rearranging our life to accommodate Deceit. While Julia was still asleep, I quietly slipped into the walk-in closet. There, behind my rows of work shirts, sat a small fireproof safe bolted to the wall. From it, I pulled out a sleek black USB drive, encrypted, containing scanned copies of all important documents, including our prenup. I double-checked the infidelity clause, though I knew it by heart. In the event of adultery by either party, the adulterous party shall waive any claims to spousal support and shall be entitled to no more than 10% of jointly held liquid assets, The faithful party shall retain the marital residence and any shared investments in full. We'd written it in plain English for the most part, at my insistence. I smiled grimly at the text. Julia had initialed right next to that paragraph 5 years ago. She knew the stakes. Maybe she'd forgotten. Or maybe she thought I'd never actually enforce it out of love or pity. If so, she greatly miscalculated. I snapped a photo of the relevant page with my phone for easy access later. There was a dark sort of comfort in seeing her signature next to mine, like a contract seething with irony. She had effectively signed away her rights if she ever betrayed me, and betray me she did. As I was locking the safe, I heard the shower turn on in the bathroom. Julia was up. I composed myself, tucking the USB drive into my pocket for my meeting with Tony later. Over breakfast, Julia was cheerful, acting every bit the loving wife. She made us smoothies and avocado toast, chattering about maybe going to a yoga class in the evening and asking about my workday. I told her I had some important client meetings and might be home a bit late, a lie to cover my meeting with Tony and perhaps other tasks. She didn't pry. Why would she, when it gave her cover for her own plans? I could almost see the calculations in her mind, wondering if she could sneak off to see Brandon. As I left, she gave me a peck on the lips and a warm, lingering hug. "Have a great day, babe," she said softly. I looked down at her, brushed her cheek with my thumb as if affectionate, and in my mind tried to reconcile how this, the gentle woman straightening my collar, was the same person entwined with another man yesterday. "You too," I managed, voice steady. And then, deciding to set a subtle psychological seed, I added, "Hey, maybe tonight, let's go out for dinner. We haven't had a date night in a while. What do you think?" Her eyes widened just a touch. Clearly, she wasn't expecting that. Perhaps she had hoped to see him tonight. But what excuse could she give? She smiled brightly. "Oh, that sounds wonderful. You're right, we've both been so busy. Let's do it." "Great. I'll make a reservation somewhere special." I kissed her again, savoring the faint look of uncertainty in her eyes. I was deliberately tightening the leash, making sure my plans would constrain hers. If she tried to wriggle out of dinner, I'd know something was up. If she went along, it was one less rendezvous for them and more time for me to operate. As I pulled out of the driveway, I felt a strange mix of satisfaction and disgust. There I was, essentially manipulating her into spending time with me, just to keep her away from him and off balance. What has this come to? I thought bitterly. But ends and means blurred when you stepped into a war. And that's what this was now. A war for truth and consequences. My first stop was not the office, but a small, unremarkable building on the east side of town, Pacific Investigative Services. Tony had recommended a private investigator named Dan Pierce in case I wanted external help confirming details. Normally, I'd trust myself to gather digital evidence, but I wasn't naive. There are limits to what I could do without tipping Julia off or crossing legal lines. An experienced PI could conduct discreet physical surveillance and perhaps gather evidence in ways I couldn't. Dan was a gruff man in his 50s, with a salt and pepper mustache and a no-nonsense attitude. We sat in his tiny office with blinds drawn, and I provided him the basics: my wife's description and routine, her lover's name and workplace, which was awkwardly also mine. I explained we worked in different departments to avoid giving away more than necessary, and the general times I suspected they met. "I have some of my own evidence already," I told him, sliding over an envelope with printouts of the photos I took, and a summary I'd typed of key dates and times from the message logs. His eyebrows rose a notch, perhaps impressed by the homework I'd done. "Usually I'm the one compiling these," he grunted, flipping through a photo of Julia and Brandon at the cafe. This is solid for a start. You know, a lot of guys come in here with just gut feelings and nothing else. You, though, you came prepared. I gave a humorless smile. I'm an engineer. I collect data. Dan nodded. So what do you need from me exactly? I want everything documented beyond any doubt. Photos of them entering or leaving a hotel, if that's what they do. Audio, if possible, of them together admitting to the affair. Though I know laws are tricky on recording audio without consent, I said. He grunted affirmatively. Two-party consent state. Can't bug her car or anything without one of you on tape. Not legally, at least. But if she's meeting him regularly, I can tail and get pictures. Video too from a distance. Usually for divorce cases, photos of public displays of affection are enough to prove infidelity. Hotel records help. If they have a pattern, I'll find it. I felt a flare of anger at the word pattern. This wasn't a one-off. They likely had a whole system for their liaisons. She works from home most days, and he works under me at our tech firm. If they meet, it's likely when I'm at work and she's free. Possibly lunchtime or right after work before I get home. Dan scribbled notes. Got it. I'll start today, shadow her and see where she goes. Usually I'd say give me a week to compile a good report. But you seem like you're on a mission with a deadline. I am, I said firmly. I'd like to move on this fast. Ideally, I want to confront her with overwhelming evidence within the next couple of weeks. Sooner, if possible. But I also don't want to tip my hand until everything's lined up. Legal actions, asset protection, exposure plan, everything. He leaned back, evaluating me. I've seen folks take different routes when they catch a cheating spouse. Some want to beg and fix it, some just want out quietly, and some want to scorch the earth. You're the latter, I take it. I met his gaze. There will be no reconciliation, only consequences. I don't intend to break any laws or cause physical harm, if that's your concern. But yes, I want them both to pay dearly. Dan cracked something that almost resembled a smile. Understood. Just making sure we're on the same page. I'll do my part. Surveillance, evidence gathering, background checks if you need. Want me to look into the guy too? Absolutely, I said at once. Brandon's life wasn't off limits. Find out if he's done this before. Any dirt on him, his career prospects, any vulnerabilities. Especially if he has a girlfriend or fiancé. I don't recall one. But if he does, that's another angle. Roger that. Dan extended a hand. I'll be in touch with updates daily. We'll keep it discreet. You'll get a secure link to view photos and notes at the end of each day. We shook on it. And as I left his office, I felt a grim reassurance. I had just effectively hired a mercenary in my little war. An expensive one, yes. But every penny was coming from our joint account. One last marital expense before that account would likely be cleaved apart. I smirked at the irony of using our money to catch her cheating. Dark irony indeed. Next, I headed to meet Tony at his law firm. We sat in a glass-walled conference room high above the city, the Pacific stretching to the horizon on one side, the sprawl of Silicon Valley on the other. It was almost noon, and the sunlight was harshly bright, which suited the stark reality of our discussion. Tony went over the game plan with measured professionalism, but I caught an undertone of personal empathy in his eyes. He'd handled many divorces, but perhaps it hit different seeing someone enforce a brutal prenup over infidelity. Still, he didn't try to dissuade me. First off, Alex, your instincts are correct. Gather all the evidence. Adultery itself isn't a crime in California. This is a no-fault divorce state, technically. But with your prenup, proof of infidelity triggers the clauses favoring you. We need that proof unassailable, in case she tries to contest it as false or coerced. She won't have a leg to stand on, I assured him. By the time I'm done, she'll be looking at photos, messages, maybe even video. She won't be able to deny it. He nodded. Good. Financially, start isolating your finances immediately, within legal bounds. That means open a new bank account in your name only, and start diverting your paycheck there. California's community property law covers earnings during marriage. But once you separate, those post-separation earnings can become your separate property if we handle it right, and if the prenup supports it. I can do that today, I agreed. I'll talk to payroll and have direct deposit updated to my personal account by next cycle. What about joint accounts and credit cards? Tony folded his hands. For joint bank accounts, by our state's rules, you shouldn't drain or hide assets unilaterally before a divorce, because it could appear in bad faith. However, given your prenup, she's not entitled to most of it if adultery is proven. Still, to avoid any claim of wrongdoing, consider this approach. Leave the joint account as is for now. Maybe quietly remove a portion you can justify as your separate property, if any. But do freeze any further large transactions. If you fear she might try to run off with money once confronted, we can file an automatic temporary restraining order at the time of divorce filing that freezes both parties' assets from being moved. Standard procedure. I clenched my jaw at the thought of her emptying our savings preemptively. She hadn't yet, as far as I knew. Our savings account balance remained intact, and I'd get alerts if large withdrawals happened. I'll keep an eye. Credit cards. I can remove her as an authorized user on mine quietly, and I will not be using the joint card anymore. If she racks up charges on it in the interim, well, I'll track those too. Maybe I'll lower the limit, citing bank policy or something, so she can't suddenly blow a fortune on it. Clever, Tony said. Now about real estate, the house. Prenup says you keep the marital residence. It's actually in your name only, right? Yes, I bought it before we married, and the deed stayed in my name. She's not co-owner, but since it became the primary home, in absence of a prenup, she might have had some equity claim. With the prenup, though, she waived rights to any appreciation. I almost felt guilty at how thoroughly I had protected myself back then. Almost. Now I was just grateful to past me. Correct, so the house is safe. She can be ordered to vacate once divorce is in process or final, but we might get a temporary agreement depending how things go. Do you want her out immediately when you confront? I thought about that. Imagining Julia continuing to live in my house a day longer than necessary turned my stomach. Yes, as soon as I confront her with evidence and file, I want her gone. I'll pack her things myself if I have to. She can go to her parents', a hotel, Brandon's place, I don't care. But out. Tony made a note. We can file a motion for exclusive use of the home citing the prenup and the circumstances. Likely she won't fight too hard if she's caught red-handed and if you handle the confrontation strategically. I smirked. Oh, I intend to handle it very strategically, publicly if possible. He raised an eyebrow, but didn't ask. Instead, he continued, Now, about spousal support. That's off the table if prenup holds and she cheated. She works a bit, but mostly you've supported her, correct? Without the prenup, she'd maybe ask for alimony, but with it, she can't. However, expect an emotional appeal or a fight on validity. Some infidelity clauses get challenged as against public policy here. But since she had independent counsel at signing and it's been years, we have a good chance it stands. Regardless, once she sees the evidence, she may be too ashamed to want this fought in court publicly. I let out a dry chuckle. I wouldn't bet on shame motivating her. But we'll see. There's also the matter of me possibly suing the lover. Tony pursed his lips. Alienation of affection? Not in this state, no. We abolished that. You could possibly make trouble for him if he works at your company. Some companies have codes of conduct. But be careful, mixing this with work could backfire on you legally if he claims you harassed or wrongfully terminated him due to personal reasons. I had considered that. I wasn't planning to fire Brandon myself. I'd involve HR with evidence of wrongdoing on his part if needed, like misuse of company time or resources for the affair, or perhaps a nepotism/ethics violation, since he was sleeping with his manager's wife, which surely was some form of misconduct. If there wasn't a clear company policy he violated, I might just have to indirectly nudge him out. But that was secondary. His fate might be sealed socially, regardless. Understood. My priority is the divorce and making sure she walks away with as little as possible and as much humiliation as possible, without jeopardizing my own standing. If making his part public helps that, I will. If not, he'll get what's coming another way. Tony gave me a cautious look. Just remember, once you set these things in motion, they can take on a life of their own. Public humiliation, social exile. Those can have unpredictable consequences. I've seen straightforward divorces turn ugly and derail when one party goes on a revenge crusade beyond the legal realm. I get it. You want justice. Just cover yourself, legally and literally. Be safe. It was perhaps the closest he'd come to telling me to moderate my revenge. I took it in stride. Don't worry, Tony. I have no intention of getting myself in trouble. That's why I'm here, making sure all of this stays within the lines even as I ruin her. He nodded, satisfied enough. We concluded by planning the general timeline. Once I had enough evidence, I'd give him the green light to draft the divorce petition citing irreconcilable differences. California doesn't allow adultery as a legal ground, but our prenup reference would be included. He'd prepare a summons and the temporary restraining orders for assets. I would choose how to serve her, through a process server or another dramatic way if I wanted. I actually already envisioned something, serving her the papers in a most public and painful manner. But that would come later. We parted, and I felt armed with legal assurance to match my righteous anger. The rest of that day, I actually went to the office and tried to do some real work. It was surreal sitting in meetings, discussing bug fixes and feature roadmaps, while my personal life was in utter havoc. More surreal was seeing Brandon stroll into the 3 p.m. stand-up meeting like he didn't have a care in the world. He shot me a friendly grin when he reported on his tasks, and I returned it with a nod, my insides churning. The audacity of him. I wondered if he noticed anything different in my demeanor, a flicker of tension, an extra weight behind my eyes. If he did, he gave no sign. I found myself studying him, the confident posture, the energetic gestures when he talked about some code refactor he was excited about. I remembered seeing that same eagerness in him when I hired him fresh out of school. I had been a mentor, almost a big brother figure. Did any part of him feel guilt? Or was seducing my wife some twisted game for him? Maybe a conquest to prove he's better than the older mentor. As the meeting wrapped up, I made a point to catch him on the way out. This was a calculated encounter. I wanted to gauge him up close and also plant a tiny seed of doubt. "Hey, Brandon." I clapped a hand on his shoulder as we left the conference room. "Good work in there. I appreciate you staying on top of things even with the chaos around the launch." He beamed, clearly pleased by the praise. "Thanks, Alex. I figure we all gotta pull our weight, right?" "Exactly." I gave him what I hoped looked like a warm, benign smile. "By the way, have you been settling in okay with the team? It's been what, a year since you joined us? You've become quite an integral part of the group." His eyes brightened. Perhaps my words fed his ego. Yeah, about a year. It's been great, honestly. I've learned a ton under you. He said it earnestly, as if he genuinely respected me. If I didn't know better, I'd believe him. Glad to hear, I continued. We reached the hallway by the elevators, and I lowered my voice slightly. You know, sometimes I worry about work-life balance on the team. Tech can be demanding. You're a young guy. Hope you're finding time for a personal life, too. I held eye contact just a second longer than usual. He blinked, and a faint flush crept up his neck. Bullseye. Oh, yeah. I keep busy outside of work, too, he stammered vaguely. I noticed he didn't mention any girlfriend. But, not too busy. Trying to keep that balance, like you said. I let my hand slide off his shoulder and pressed the elevator button. Good. Good. It's important. I've seen jobs strain relationships before. You have someone special, you hold on to them, make time. I'm lucky Julia understands the crazy hours sometimes. I said my wife's name deliberately, watching his face. Brandon's expression flickered just a bit, eyes darting to the elevator display. The doors opened, and we both stepped in. Yeah, she's great, he said carefully. I smiled in a wistful way. She really is. Put up with me for 6 years. I think she likes our little tech life by the coast. God knows I love it. Sun, sea, and coding. Who could ask for more? He laughed weakly. Totally. We rode in silence for a moment. I decided to throw one more dart. We should do another double date soon. Like when you first joined, remember? That dinner with the whole team and plus ones. I recall you didn't bring anyone then, but maybe you have someone now. Julia and I love to host. Could barbecue or something. He swallowed, his Adam's apple bobbing. Was that panic I saw? I'm actually still single, no girlfriend or anything. He scratched the back of his head, a classic nervous tell. No worries, all in good time, I replied, stepping out as we reached the lobby. I fought the urge to say something like, well, keep your hands off other people's wives in the meantime, and instead gave him a friendly wave. Have a good evening, man. You too, Alex, he responded, relief visible as I walked away. Once out of sight, I exhaled slowly. Every second of that conversation I'd been holding back fury, but channeling it into a sort of polite menace. Did he pick up on it? Hard to say. He definitely felt something was off, but likely he just found it awkward that his boss was prying into his personal life. He might even warn Julia, hey, your husband was weirdly chatty with me today. The thought worried me. Perhaps I shouldn't have approached him at all, but I wanted him uneasy. If he mentioned it to Julia, all the better. Let a little paranoia start creeping in for them. My feigned cluelessness at work but probing about personal life could unnerve them just enough. They might think I suspect, or they might not. Either way, it adds tension to their fling. Planted suspicions. Check. That evening, I went through with the promised dinner. I took Julia to a rooftop restaurant overlooking the bay. The setting sun painted the sky in lavender and rose as we dined on gourmet seafood. To anyone watching us, we were the picture of a loving couple having a date night. Julia played her part flawlessly. She was charming, attentive, reaching across the table to hold my hand, laughing at my quips. And I, mastering the performance of my life, reciprocated with smiles and anecdotes, asking about her latest design project as if nothing was wrong. Inside, I was hollow. I'd caught a glimpse of a notification on her phone earlier when she was in the restroom. A text from Brandon that simply read, "Everything okay? Thinking of you." She had left it unanswered so far, probably because she was with me. If my instincts were right, He was feeling a bit unsure after our brief chat and needed her reassurance. Good. While sipping my wine, I contemplated the bizarre duality of this moment. Here I was essentially courting my wife, even as I prepared to destroy her. It was part of the plan to keep her unsuspecting. If I suddenly turned cold or distant, she might sniff out that I knew something. So I kept the charade, even dialed up the affection. At one point I slipped and almost said something cutting. When she mentioned the tea shop again, I nearly remarked, "Oh, did you go there before or after your coffee yesterday?" But I bit my tongue and instead complimented her. "You always pick the best teas. I can't wait to try it tomorrow morning." As we watched the city lights flicker on, Julia leaned her head on my shoulder. The breeze was cool, and I draped my arm around her. It struck me that some twisted part of her might truly still love me in her own way, even now. Perhaps she compartmentalized the affair as something separate, an escape rather than a replacement. Or maybe she was just an exceptionally good actress serving up normalcy to avoid conflict. Either way, it didn't matter. I had no intention of saving this. The sweeter she acted, the more it stoked my anger under the surface. Dark irony hung over every laugh we shared. She didn't know it, but I was savoring these final normal moments, the way one savors the last calm minutes before a storm tears everything apart. It was all going to be fuel. That night, after we returned home and she fell asleep, I crept out of bed to review the PI's first daily report. Dan had not wasted time. He'd followed Julia from our house during the day. Apparently, instead of yoga or errands as she'd implied to me, she had indeed met up with Brandon in the afternoon, just at a different location this time, a park on the outskirts of town. Photos showed them sitting intimately on a bench under a tree, her hand on his thigh, his arm around her back. Another series caught them in a secluded area behind some trees sharing a kiss. Those made my stomach lurch even as I meticulously saved them. However, they parted after the park, likely because she had dinner plans with me. Brandon had headed back to work. She went home to get ready. Dan's notes mentioned he overheard a snippet of their conversation at the park while pretending to jog by with earbuds. Julia had said softly, "I'm sorry about tonight. I'll make it up to you, tomorrow for sure." So she was apologizing for being with me tonight and promising to see him tomorrow. They were likely planning a proper rendezvous on Wednesday, probably more than a park. Perhaps a hotel or even our house if I were at work. The thought of that made me grip the edge of my desk so hard my knuckles went white. They think I'll be safely out of the way, huh? I realized with a grim thrill that this could be my chance. If they were aiming to meet tomorrow while I was at work, I could set a trap. Feign like I'm gone for the day. Maybe even encourage it by telling Julia I have to work late again. Then catch them in flagrante delicto. With Dan's help, I could catch them at whatever hotel or, God forbid, in my own bed. Though I doubted she'd risk our home in daylight, but who knows. Catching them physically together would be the coup de grace of evidence and also provide an opportunity for a dramatic showdown. But I had to be smart. If I confronted too soon, I needed to have all other elements lined up. Legal filings ready, etc. Was I there yet? Possibly. I had a trove of evidence already, and Tony could file within a day's notice. I decided I'd let the plan play out. I messaged Dan through the secure app. "If they meet tomorrow, I want to be there in person to witness. Let me know time, place ASAP once you tail." He responded almost instantly with a thumbs up. I went to bed again, my heart pounding not with sorrow now, but with anticipation. The trap was baited, with me as the bait in a sense, pretending to be oblivious and at work. Their confidence would be their downfall. Before I closed my eyes, I checked Julia's phone through my digital access. She had finally replied to Brandon after our date. All good. Dinner was last minute. Tomorrow, definitely. I need you. The disgust and anger that flared reading those words were tempered by a cold smile on my lips. Yes, tomorrow, I thought, almost giddy in a dark way. Tomorrow you'll get what you need, Julia, and so will I. Wednesday dawned clear and bright. I kissed Julia goodbye in the morning, telling her I had another packed day and might even crash at my colleague's place near the office if we worked late on the launch. This was a bold lie, staying out all night. But I wanted to give her maximum assurance that I was completely out of the picture. She raised an eyebrow and teased, "Don't overwork yourself. Maybe I'll have a girls' night in with a movie then." I smiled. Girls' night in, sure. Just don't watch our shows without me, I replied playfully. Inside, I was nauseated by how easily we slid into these casual deceptions. I drove off as usual, but a few blocks away I parked in a convenience store lot and waited. I'd told Tony to have the filing ready by end of day, anticipating I'd give the signal after whatever went down. I texted him now saying, "Likely filing tomorrow morning. Today is evidence gathering and confrontation." He simply replied, "Be careful. Call me when ready." At around 10 a.m., Dan messaged via the secure app. "She's on the move, left home in casual clothes, likely meeting. I'm on her tail." I started my car and headed in the direction of our house, staying a good ways behind to not be seen. Another message from Dan. "They're meeting at Seaside Hotel, room 214. She just checked in. He's not here yet." I nearly laughed at the cliché. A hotel. At least they had the decency not to use our bed, I thought bitterly. Seaside Hotel was a small boutique inn along the coast, not far from that park from yesterday. Midweek, it wouldn't be busy. They likely picked it for discretion. I met Dan in the parking area of a strip mall across the street. He looked odd in a floral tourist shirt and sunglasses, a guise to blend in. "She's in there," he said under his breath, pretending to show me a tourist map as cover. Second floor, room facing the back. She used a credit card to book the room, a card under her name, FYI. My teeth grit. If it was our joint card, I'd see the charge later and have more evidence of her spending on the affair, something Tony said could help in asset division arguments. But that was minor now. "And Brandon?" I asked. "Not arrived yet. But when he does, I can slip in behind him or by another entry and get video of the hallway encounter. Maybe even audio through the door if they get loud." I got a directional mic. I nodded, my pulse racing. This was it. The adrenaline made my hands almost shake, but I steadied them. "I'm going in too," I said firmly. Dan looked wary. "Your call, but be careful. You barging in there could be dangerous or at least messy, and it could complicate evidence if things get physical." I understood. If I assaulted them, I'd become the bad guy legally. I had no intention of violence. Well, I fantasized about it, yes, but I wanted a cleaner revenge. Still, I wanted to see the look on their faces. "I won't barge right away. Let's do it like this. You capture whatever initial greetings or incriminating actions at the door. Once they're inside, give them a few minutes. Then I knock or use a key. Here I swiped one from the front desk." I showed him the master key card I'd managed to finagle. While driving over, I had a brief window where Julia was checking in to quickly visit the front desk under the guise of surprising my friend in 214. But I'm locked out. A $100 slipped to the young clerk did the trick. I'd found it disturbingly easy. Dan's eyebrows rose. "Well prepared. All right, I'll back you up, but I'll stay out of sight unless needed." My job is to record, not intervene unless you're in danger. Understood, I replied. In danger? The real danger was the shattering of my heart. But that had already happened. The rest was just logistics. We didn't have to wait long. A flash of blue caught my eye. Brandon's Audi pulling into the hotel's lot. He stepped out, glancing around furtively, then headed in a side entrance. Through my earpiece, I wore one connected to Dan's equipment. I heard it. The sound of a door opening and Julia's soft gasp of delight. Dan, quick on his feet, must have tailed him up. He'd placed a tiny wireless camera on the vending machine down the hall earlier. He had pointed it at 214. I couldn't see the video in real time, but I heard their voices echoing quietly through the hall via the mic. Julia, you're here. God, I was worried you might not come. Brandon, are you kidding? I practically ran out of the office. The unmistakable sound of a prolonged kiss. Julia, I missed you. Come inside. Brandon, you taste? Inside, yeah. I felt a mix of agony and fury hearing their muffled makeout. They closed the door. I motioned to Dan and we stealthily crossed the street, entered the hotel's side door and made our way to the second floor. My heart was hammering so loudly I feared they'd hear it through the door. Outside room 214, I could hear them clearer. To my surprise, they were talking first, not immediately jumping to sex. I held up a hand to Dan, signaling to record this. Inside, Julia's voice. Last night was so hard, I hate lying to him. Brandon. I know, babe. But at least he's busy this week. You said he might not even come home tonight? Julia. That's what he told me. Maybe he'll just sleep at his office or with a coworker. Honestly, I don't care right now. I just want to be with you. Brandon, chuckling. With me, huh? How exactly do you want me? Julia, laughing softly. Don't tease. We don't have a lot of time. Let's make the most of it. I cringed. Enough. Before things could escalate further, I nodded to Dan. He pressed himself back around a corner out of direct sight. I raised the key card and slid it into the lock. With a soft beep, the door clicked open. I pushed the door wide and stepped in. Time seemed to slow to a syrupy crawl as I took in the tableau. Julia and Brandon were in the middle of the room near the bed, wrapped in an embrace. Her shirt was halfway unbuttoned, revealing the lacy edge of a bra, and his hands were around her waist. Their faces were flushed, eyes shut in the prelude of another kiss, until the sound of the door opening made them turn toward me. For a heartbeat, nobody moved. Julia's eyes went wide, as though she was seeing a ghost. Brandon actually jumped back, nearly tripping over his own feet. They separated like two guilty teenagers caught by a parent. I stepped fully into the room, closing the door behind me with a soft click. Feigned indifference was no longer necessary. I let my expression show a fraction of the cold fury I felt. Don't stop on my account, I said quietly, each word measured. I mean, you certainly didn't stop when I walked into our home every day, or when I kissed you goodnight, Julia. Why stop now? Julia looked like she might faint. Alex! Oh my God, Alex! Her voice cracked, and she reached out instinctively toward me, as if to ward off a coming storm or to plead. Brandon's face had drained of all color. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He looked to Julia, then back to me, panic in his eyes. I closed the distance slowly, my gaze locked on them. The air in the room was thick with the scent of her perfume and betrayal. My heart was pounding, but I felt eerily calm in that moment. This was the climax I had anticipated, and strangely, I felt almost detached, as if I were an actor hitting his lines on cue. Julia started babbling, tears welling up. This isn't, I can explain. It's not what it looks like. I let out a sharp, humorless laugh. Not what it looks like? Julia, it looks like you're in a hotel room with my employee about to have sex. If there's another explanation, I'd truly love to hear it. My tone was icy, and I noticed Brandon flinch. She choked on words, tears spilling now. I never wanted to hurt you, Alex. Please, let's just talk. Talk, I snapped, raising my voice for the first time. I could feel years of love and months of suspicion crystallizing into pure anger. When exactly were you planning to talk, Julia? Before or after you slept with him? Or maybe after you drained our bank account and ran off? When? She shook her head vehemently, stepping closer. No, it was never like that. I wasn't going to leave you, I swear. She shot a desperate look at Brandon, who remained silent, as if frozen. I followed her gaze and turned my full attention to him. And you, I said with venom. I welcomed you. I mentored you. How did you repay me? By crawling into my wife's bed or the nearest hotel. Was it fun, Brandon? Was it worth it? He finally found his voice, stammering, Alex, I am so sorry. I never meant, this wasn't personal. I advanced until I was mere feet from him, and he backed up until he hit the wall. He was taller than me by a couple inches, and younger, but at that moment I swear I saw fear in his eyes of the older, furious man before him. Good. Not personal? I repeated, dangerously quiet. You sleep with my wife and that's not personal? Enlighten me then. What was it? Some casual fling just blowing off steam? Did you think I wouldn't find out? Or were you hoping I would, so you could take her for yourself? I'm dying to know. What was your plan? He swallowed, glancing at Julia. We didn't have a plan, he mumbled. It just happened. Julia stepped in front of me now, sobbing, hands clasped as if in prayer. Alex, please. This is all my fault, not his. Please don't hurt him or yourself. I'm so sorry. Her voice broke on the last word. I stared at her. This woman I had loved so deeply, now trembling and disheveled, tears streaming down her face. A part of me ached seeing her like that, but another part, the part she betrayed, hardened against it. Emotional twist. I had to maintain my resolve. Feigned indifference earlier was to lull her. Now I needed a dose of coldness to not be swayed by her tears. Hurt him, I echoed, raising an eyebrow. Oh, I won't lay a finger on him. That's not how this works. I turned slightly and called out, voice aimed toward the slightly ajar door. You getting all this, Dan? On cue, Dan pushed the door wider and stepped partly into view, camera in hand. Julia gasped, trying to cover her chest, realizing her partial undress. Brandon looked utterly bewildered. Who is that? He stuttered. This is Dan Pierce, I said, almost conversationally. Private investigator. He's been documenting your little romance for a while now. Say cheese. I gave a mirthless grin as Dan's camera whirred, capturing their shocked, miserable faces. Julia's eyes darted to me in horror. You hired a PI to spy on me? I cocked my head. Of course I did. What did you expect? That I'd never notice? I'm not as stupid or oblivious as you both thought. Then I aimed a barb directly at her, voice low. I trusted you, but I also trusted my gut when it started telling me something was wrong. And guess what? My gut was right. You were lying and cheating all this time. It wasn't all this time, she cried. It was a mistake, Alex. We only It just happened recently. I didn't plan to— To what? To fall onto his dick? I snarled, letting crudity slice her. Spare me. I read the messages. I saw the photos. I stood outside that door and heard you planning this. I gestured to the bed. How long? How many times? Give me a number, Julia. Or shall I have Dan recite them from his log? She covered her mouth, sobbing too hard to speak. Brandon muttered, Alex, please, man. This was the first time we— I cut him off with a glare. Don't even try. Maybe it's the first time at a hotel, but you've been screwing with each other for weeks, if not months. An emotional affair is still an affair. You think I didn't hear that you were complaining about lying to me last night and making up for it today? You really want to play the semantics game now? Fine. It's all going in the divorce either way. Divorce. Julia whispered the word, as if it had never occurred to her. Perhaps in her fantasy, she thought we'd just continue our marriage as a facade while she got her thrills on the side. Or that if I found out, I'd forgive her after some drama. If so, she was learning otherwise. Yes, divorce, I said firmly. I already have the papers drawn up. I reached into my inner jacket pocket and pulled out a folded stack, the draft Tony prepared, which I had printed this morning, unsigned yet but ready. I tossed it onto the bed. In fact, you might want to peruse that, both of you. There's a lovely clause about adultery. Brandon, pale and sweating, looked over Julia's shoulder as she picked up the document with trembling hands. She skimmed, eyes widening when she got to the relevant part. I decided to articulate it for dramatic effect. You see, our prenuptial agreement, which you apparently forgot about, has an infidelity clause. My voice was deceptively calm now, almost cheerful in its malice. In short, darling, you cheated, so you get virtually nothing. No alimony, no stake in my assets beyond a token fraction of what we accumulated. The house stays mine, my investments stay mine, and any joint assets are 90% mine. That piece of paper is basically an invoice for the price of your betrayal. Julia shook her head, clutching the papers. Alex, we can work something out, please. Oh, we will, I said. We'll work out how fast you can get out of my house for starters. You can go shack up with Loverboy here. I'm sure that'll thrill him, right? I glanced at Brandon, who looked like he was either going to throw up or bolt. He raised his hands plaintively. Look, man, I know you're upset. I laughed sharply. Upset? That's one word. I'd say enraged, betrayed, disgusted are better ones. But regardless, my feelings aren't the issue. The issue is consequences, and they're coming for both of you. Alex, please, Julia sobbed, reaching for me. I stepped back, and she fell to her knees, literally on the floor at my feet, grabbing at my hands. I beg you, don't do this. Don't end us like this. I love you, I do. I'm sorry. It was a mistake. I wasn't thinking. I was feeling lonely and insecure, and it just happened, and I withdrew my hands from her grip, as if her touch burned. Seeing her kneel and plead might have broken me a day ago, but now it felt oddly satisfying. Psychological bait. In a way, I had gotten her exactly where I wanted, recognizing my power in this moment. You should have thought of all that before, I said coldly. I gave you everything, Julia. Love, support, a good life. If you were lonely or needed something, you could have come to me, talked to me. Instead, you found solace in my protégé's bed. That's not a mistake. That's a choice, and now you get to live with it. I took a step back, turning partially toward the door. I think we're done here. Dan, you got enough? He nodded, having captured every tearful plea on video. More than enough evidence, beyond any doubt, that she admitted and regretted it. Brandon, who had been silent in shock during Julia's begging, suddenly stepped forward, perhaps emboldened by desperation. "Alex, wait. Look, if you want to blame someone, blame me," I pursued her. "It's my fault." This was unexpected. He was taking the fall? Perhaps he thought that might cause me to spare Julia. Or perhaps guilt spurred him to at least attempt nobility. Too late. "How gallant," I sneered. "Unfortunately for both of you, blame is plentiful enough. I do blame you, trust me. In fact, I plan to make sure you reap what you've sown. Consider your job gone, obviously." He opened his mouth to protest, but I held up a hand. "I could fire you outright for plenty of valid reasons. Fraternizing with the boss's wife, using company time for an affair, who knows what else. But I won't even need to." I allowed a cruel smile. "You're going to resign, effective immediately." Brandon blinked rapidly. What if I don't? You'd really fire me over this, even if I'm the one leaving the company." I chuckled, as if amused by his naivety. "Oh, Brandon, sweet summer child. You betrayed your boss and friend in the worst way. Of course you're fired, but I'm giving you the sliver of dignity of resigning instead. That way, at least I don't have to report to HR the full cause. Unless you want me to." I watched the threat land. He knew if I detailed why he was being terminated, it would be a black mark likely to follow him in our relatively small industry circle. He lowered his head. "I'll send my resignation by end of day," he muttered, defeated. I gave a curt nod. "Good, and don't expect a glowing reference." Turning back to Julia, who was still on the floor weeping, I delivered the final blow. "I'll be moving forward with the divorce immediately. I expect you to sign the papers without contest. If you fight me on this, we can go to court, and I'll lay out everything, these videos, photos, messages, to ensure you get nothing and everyone knows what you did. Think about your parents, your friends. You want them to hear all the sordid details, because I will not hesitate." She looked up at me, eyes red and full of sorrow. You're acting like you hate me," she whispered. I stared down at her for a long moment. "Hate you?" I echoed softly. The room was quiet except for her sniffles and the distant crash of waves outside the hotel. "I wish I could, Julia. It would be easier if I did. But the opposite of love isn't hate. It's indifference. And that's what you are to me now. Nothing. Just someone I used to love, who I don't even know anymore. A stranger with my wife's face." She wailed at that, covering her face. Even Dan shifted uncomfortably at the raw anguish in her cry. I steeled myself, forcing any lingering empathy out. No reconciliation. I moved to the door and motioned Dan out. Before exiting, I turned back once more. "Brandon," I said flatly. He looked up. "If I were you, I'd make myself scarce. Not just from my company, but from this city, these circles. Because I will share what you've done with anyone who asks. You'll be radioactive socially. Better to cut and run." I didn't wait for a response. I stepped out into the hall and Dan followed, shutting the door on the tableau of ruin we left behind. Julia collapsed on the floor, and Brandon kneeling beside her, both wrecked. My heart was pounding, and I felt a wave of something between triumph and tragedy wash over me. I had orchestrated this confrontation, executed it to near perfection. They were exposed, ashamed, and cornered. And yet, as I walked away, I felt an unexpected sting of pain in my chest. It was truly over. The woman I loved was gone, in a sense. All that remained was the fallout. "Are you all right?" Dan asked quietly as we reached the stairwell. I realized I had tears in my eyes. not of regret or longing, but of sheer emotional overload. I wiped them quickly. "I'll be fine," I said, voice rough. "Thank you for everything. Send me the invoice and the final package of evidence." He nodded. "You got it. For what it's worth, I think you handled that pretty well." He meant efficiently, I suspected. He likely had seen clients break down or lash out worse. I simply nodded, not trusting my voice. In the parking lot, I watched as Dan drove off. I sat in my car for a few minutes, just breathing. I thought of Julia's wail, of Brandon's shock, and of the quiet that would follow when they left that room separately to face the mess of their lives. A dark part of me hoped they'd turn on each other now, blaming one another for what happened. It would be fitting if this love of theirs couldn't survive the pressure. I took out my phone and composed a single text to Tony. "Pull the trigger." He'd know I meant file the divorce. Next, I opened our group chat with our close friends, a handful of couples we often socialized with, people who thought Julia and I were the golden pair. The dark irony not lost on me, I typed, "Just found out Julia's been cheating on me. We're done. I'm sorry to share bad news, but I figured you should hear it from me. Not looking for sympathy, just understanding as I navigate this. I'll be okay." It was perhaps a bit dramatic to broadcast, but I wanted to control the narrative. Public exposure had been one of my goals, and here it began. I imagined Julia's embarrassment when friends started calling her after seeing that. She might not have even left the hotel room yet, and already her social world would be imploding. I also sent a short email to our HR. "Effective immediately, Brandon has tendered his resignation. Please process accordingly." I used his name, putting it formally to start the record. I knew he'd comply since I had him cornered. As I started the engine and drove towards what was once my home, I allowed myself one small mercy. I didn't plan any further direct confrontation with Julia for now. She'd get served officially, she'd have to move out swiftly, but I wouldn't keep kicking her when she was down. I'd achieved what I set out to, her legal defeat, social humiliation, and an exit from my life on my terms. The next few days unfurled in a blur of aftermath. True to his word, Tony filed our divorce petition that very afternoon and arranged to have Julia served at home by the next morning. I didn't plan to be there when she got the envelope. I'd made arrangements to stay at a hotel downtown temporarily. It was partly to avoid the immediate emotional mess, but also strategically. I didn't want any heated altercations under our roof that could complicate the situation or give her ammunition. Until she moved out, distance was better. She was indeed served Thursday morning. I know this because I started receiving frantic texts from her around 9 a.m. "Julia, Alex, please, I got the papers. Can we talk? I don't want to fight you on this. I know I messed up. Please, just meet me once. I'm begging you." "Julia, I'll sign whatever you want. I don't care about the money or stuff. I want to apologize. Explain if you'll let me, please." "Julia, I can't stop crying. I know I did this to us. I'm so sorry. I hate myself. Please talk to me." I read them, feeling strangely calm. Perhaps I had shed all my tears in private last night, or perhaps my anger had burned out, leaving cold embers of resolve. Either way, I didn't respond. I forwarded the messages to Tony and then archived them. At work, the gossip mill was in overdrive. My team had gotten wind that Brandon resigned suddenly. Some suspected a scandal, though none imagined the truth. I preemptively told HR and my boss in confidence that he left due to gross personal misconduct, that I wasn't at liberty to fully detail but could if necessary. They didn't push. I had a stellar reputation, and Brandon was new enough that his exit caused more curiosity than concern. Officially, it was a quiet departure. Unofficially, I was sure the story would leak in time, especially if any co-workers were part of the friend circles where I'd spilled the cheating news. Indeed, within 48 hours of my text to friends, the social fallout for Julia was evident. A mutual friend, Mark, reached out. "Man, I just saw your message. I'm shocked and so sorry. We had no idea. Whatever you need, we're here." Another friend, Serena, wrote me privately. "I can't believe Julia did that. She called me crying, but I haven't responded yet. I don't know what to say to her. Just want you to know we support you. This is awful." It gave me grim satisfaction that word spread exactly as intended. Julia was facing not only a broken marriage but also disapproval from those who mattered to her. Social exile, check. Friday afternoon, through my security cameras, I observed Julia finally leaving the house. She had a couple of suitcases and her laptop bag, and her friend, Serena, ironically, was there to pick her up. So Serena did respond after all, likely to help Julia relocate temporarily. It was strange watching the live feed on my phone. Julia walking out our front door, pausing to look around the living room one last time, shoulders shaking with sobs. Even from the grainy camera, I could tell she was devastated. She gently placed her house key on the console table by the entry, a small gesture of acceptance, perhaps, then wiped her eyes and stepped out, pulling the door shut behind her. I had to sit down after watching that. There was a hollowness in my chest, an echo of loss. I had won unequivocally. She was out of the house, complying with everything, not even fighting for a penny or a piece of furniture. Tony even reported that her attorney, some family friend her parents hired, said she'd sign the settlement as is to expedite things. She was essentially surrendering without a fight. This should have made me happy. And in a sense, it did. My plan had worked so thoroughly that I almost felt a pang of anticlimax. There wasn't even a legal battle to relish. She was just gone, and quickly. Perhaps that's where the dark irony truly set in. I had orchestrated a perfect revenge, but standing amidst the ruins of my marriage, I had to confront that none of this made me feel good. Satisfied, yes, in terms of justice. But good? No. There's no true joy in any of this. Only a grim sense of balance restored at a terrible cost. Over the weekend, I oversaw the changing of locks on the house and an inventory of everything for property division. Not that there was much to divide now. She left most behind. Through lawyers, she indicated she'd come by later for some personal belongings when I wasn't there, to avoid drama. Fine by me. I threw myself into cleaning up, almost symbolically scrubbing away her presence. Bed sheets she'd lain on, toiletries from our bathroom tossed in a box, photos of us removed from frames. It was cathartic in a somber way. Monday rolled around, and I returned to work a free man on paper, though the divorce wasn't final yet. Whispers had circulated. A colleague in another department bluntly asked me, "Is it true about Brandon and your wife?" I simply nodded and said, "It's handled. Please respect my privacy." That shut most people up, but I could tell my professional reputation had a strange new aura. Some looked at me with pity, others with a sort of impressed wariness, as if I were not to be messed with, given how swiftly I dealt with things. Midweek, I had a final meeting with Tony to sign the settlement papers that Julia had already signed. It was done, just pending court approval, a formality given it was uncontested. "You got essentially everything you wanted," Tony commented as we shook hands. "It's a favorable outcome, all things considered. Are you holding up okay?" I appreciated the concern behind his lawyerly demeanor. "I will be," I replied. The house feels empty, but I'll manage. I plan to stay busy. As I left his office, paperwork in hand, I realized I stood at the beginning of a new chapter, one I hadn't planned for. My life was mine alone again, and I could shape it as I wished. In the final week of that ordeal, I wrote a letter, a sort of therapy exercise for myself that I never actually intended to send. It read, "Dear Julia, this is likely the last communication from me. By now you know that our life together is over, and you have felt the consequences of the choices you made. I need you to understand that what I did, exposing you, cutting you off legally and financially, was not born from a place of petty vengeance alone, but from a need to reclaim my dignity and sense of justice. You might think I'm cruel, and maybe I am now. But I wasn't always. I was kind and trusting, and giving with you. Perhaps too much. And when that trust was shattered, I acted in the only ways I knew how to protect myself from further harm. I did love you deeply. That's why your betrayal hurt so profoundly. There was a time I would have done anything to work things out, to forgive almost any transgression, if only you had been honest and remorseful from the start. But by the time I discovered everything, it was far too late. The man I was when I loved you died the moment I watched you break your vows. What replaced him was someone colder, someone who learned how to turn pain into strategy. I don't expect you to forgive me for the humiliation you've endured recently, but I also don't feel sorry for it. Perhaps that's the part of me that might need healing in the future, the part that doesn't regret twisting the knife. Time will tell. For what it's worth, I do hope you find some path to understanding why you did what you did, so you don't make the same mistake in the future with someone else. I won't be a part of that journey. This will be the last you hear from me directly. We will finalize our divorce and then go our separate ways permanently. Take care of yourself, Julia. I did once truly wish you happiness. I suppose I still do, in spite of everything. Because that's who I prefer to be at my core, a man who doesn't carry hate in his heart forever. But your happiness will no longer come at the expense of mine. Sincerely, Alex. I folded that letter and locked it in my desk drawer. Maybe one day I'd burn it or read it again to see how far I've come. In the weeks that followed, life slowly assumed a new normal. I focused on work projects with renewed intensity, often staying late not because I had to hide anything now, but because it distracted me from an empty house. I took up running along the coast in the mornings, something I'd neglected. Each mile on the pavement was like shedding an old skin of stress. I learned from a friend that Julia left town to stay with her parents for a while, maybe permanently. There was talk she might look for a fresh start elsewhere, which made sense. Around the office, Brandon became a ghost of a memory. No one really mentioned him after the initial buzz died down. Last I heard through the grapevine, he struggled to find a comparable job locally. The tech community quietly got wind that he'd left under questionable circumstances, which in our world can be damning even without specifics. I doubt he knew how to hack that reputation problem, ironically. One evening, a couple months later, I sat on my deck with a laptop and a glass of whiskey, watching the sun dip into the Pacific. I was drafting some code for a personal project, but my mind wandered to the past events. The sea breeze was cool and salty, the same as countless nights when Julia and I would sit out here planning our future, or just enjoying the quiet. The difference now was that I was alone, and surprisingly, I was okay with that. The phone buzzed with a message. It was from Mark, inviting me to a small gathering at his place that weekend. I hesitated. It would be the first social event with friends since the split, They assured me Julia wouldn't be there. She was still away. They likely wanted to cheer me up or just reintegrate me into normalcy. I replied, "Count me in." It was time to step back into social life and not let the shadow of what happened define me entirely. As I closed the laptop, I realized something. My meticulous planning and execution of revenge had, in a way, been the bridge that carried me over the abyss of heartbreak. It gave me structure and a goal when I could have otherwise been lost in despair. That thought almost troubled me. What did it say about me that I found purpose in dismantling someone? Perhaps I'd unpack that in therapy later. For now, I was simply relieved to have made it through to the other side intact. I took a slow sip of whiskey, feeling its warmth. In reflection, I didn't enjoy what I'd done, at least not in a wholesome way, but I recognized its necessity for my own healing and sense of justice. The strategic legal maneuvers, the emotional twists, the tactical moves to ruin their facade, these were all means to an end, closing a chapter on my terms, not as a victim, but as an active agent of change. Dark irony, indeed. The skills that made me a good programmer, problem-solving, meticulous planning, anticipating failure points, made me an effective architect of revenge. I solved the problem of my wife's betrayal as if debugging a malicious code. The bug was removed, the system secure once more. A therapist might say I hadn't truly moved on, that I engaged rather than simply walking away. Maybe they'd be right. But moving on comes in many forms. Mine just happened to involve a bit of scorched earth. As the last light of day melted into the ocean, I felt a sense of calm resolution. I had been tested, and I survived. Not without scars, but also not with open wounds. In time, perhaps I'd even forgive, if not forget. Not for their sake, but for mine. Forgiveness, after all, is the final act of taking power away from the hurt. That night, I slept deeply and without nightmares for the first time in a long while. My conscience, surprisingly, was quiet. In the game of love and betrayal, I had played my hand with ruthless precision and emerged the victor, at least in the eyes of the law and society. Emotionally, it would take longer to declare victory, but I was on the path. And as for Julia and her lover, I realized I didn't much care what happened to them now. Perhaps that was the clearest sign that my plan had achieved its purpose. I felt indifferent towards them. The opposite of love, indeed. In the weeks that turned to months, divorce finalized, assets redistributed, mostly to me, life went on. I found new hobbies, threw myself into a startup idea, and gradually, day by day, found myself smiling again at simple things. A bug solved at work, a particularly stunning sunset, a joke with a friend. One late afternoon, I returned from a run to find an envelope at my door. It was from Julia's lawyer. Inside was a handwritten note from her, likely something she asked them to forward. It was short. "Alex, I signed everything. I won't bother you again. I just want to say I am endlessly sorry for the pain I caused. You may not believe me, but I did love you. Some part of me always will. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, and I won't ask for it. I just hope you find happiness again. You are a good man, and you didn't deserve what I did. I accept all the consequences without resentment toward you. Goodbye. Julia." I read it twice, searching for any bitterness or blame, but there was none. It was perhaps the most honest thing she'd ever written to me. I stood there, the evening light golden through my doorway, and unexpectedly felt a weight lift. Her acknowledgement and acceptance, though far too late to matter between us, still gave a sense of closure. I folded the note, put it back in the envelope, and placed it in the box with our wedding photos and other keepsakes I couldn't yet throw away. Perhaps I'd dispose of it all eventually. For now, it lived in the attic, out of sight but not entirely out of mind. As I closed the attic hatch and headed to take a shower, I caught myself in the mirror. There I was, early 30s, a bit leaner from stress and running, eyes a touch harder than before, but still me. A man who'd been deeply wronged and who chose to stand up for himself in the face of it. A man, I realized, I could respect when all was said and done. Not every story has a happy ending, but mine at least had a just one. In the silence of my home, I found a certain peace, hard-won and tinged with sadness, but peace nonetheless. I stepped into the shower, letting the hot water wash away the day. And as steam swirled around me, I closed my eyes and simply breathed, ready to face whatever came next in my life, free from lies and stronger for the trials by fire I had walked through and engineered myself.